Hey guys, it's Zayden here with Twisted Customs, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do the Illuminated Window Switch mod. This is a somewhat difficult mod. It takes some modification of the window switches themselves and some pretty tight space soldering. So if you're not really proficient at soldering, this may not be the best mod for you to attempt yourself. You're going to need a few tools to do this mod. You're going to need a small flat tip screwdriver, a fairly small Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of wire cutters, an X-Acto knife or a razor blade, a wire stripping tool or lighter if you prefer to strip your wires with lighters like I do. I don't use this very much. I prefer to just use the lighter. You'll also need something to make the holes a little bit bigger. I just use this end of a round file. It works out pretty well for me, but you could use your X-Acto knife or razor blade to do the same thing, or even get a drill bit that's pretty close to LED size to round out the holes. The LEDs we're going to be using are 3mm pre-wired 12-volt LEDs. These come pre-wired with resistors that are under the heat shrink here, and they're ready to go into any kind of auto application. You're going to need 7 of these total. There's 4 for the main switch and then 3 for the other doors. You can pick them up online on eBay. They're relatively cheap. You can usually get about 10 of them for probably around 15 bucks. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started here. First thing you need to do is disassemble the switch. On the bottom, normally there will be 2 screws on here and here. I've already taken those out to make it a little bit quicker. But once you take those 2 screws out, and you're going to pop these tabs right here. Just put your screwdriver down in there, pry it out a little bit, and pull up on the same time. And you expose the circuit board. As you can see here, this is my first attempt. I'll get to the reason why this happened a little bit later, but this is what you can end up with doing this mod if you're not careful. This part actually caught fire and fried the whole board. So just a little word of caution there before you attempt this. Alright, I'm going to flip the switch over and do the same thing that we did on the bottom for this top plate. Now you're going to have to remove the 4 tops of the buttons and the window locking switch. The window locking switch, you can just grab it and pull it off. It takes a little bit of force, but it pops right off. Alright, now for the window switches, there's a little groove right here. This is the easiest way that I found to do it, is just put your little flat tip in that hole and pry up, and it'll pop right off. And just pull it the rest of the way and set it aside. Once you have those switches removed, you can go ahead and lift that up and you'll expose the circuit board. I'm only going to walk you guys through modifying one switch. I mean, it's the same on all the switches, so once I show you one, you should be able to handle the rest of them. The switches are just pressed onto the board. These copper tabs right here is what hold them in. Just put your screwdriver down under there and pry it up gently, and it'll come right off. Right. There's a couple things we need to do with this switch in order to get the LEDs in there. You can see there's 3 holes on the bottom. We'll be enlarging one of those holes to fit the LED into. And there's also, you can see it, this little lip right here needs to be cut out. So if we put the LED in that hole, we'd bend the wires over and cut that lip out so the wires can run out this way. Before we do that, you're going to want to completely disassemble the switch. Again, you're going to use your screwdriver, just kind of pop this side piece off right here, and just kind of twist the switch out. Alright, on the inside you have 2 contact plates. I found it best to remove these when doing this mod because when you're enlarging the hole, it's possible to bend these contacts, and bending them back into place so the switch would function correctly is actually what led to me frying my original circuit board. These aren't attached in any way. They just kind of sit in there. So just use your screwdriver again and just pull them out. These need to be straight across. If one side is bent up slightly, it won't make proper contact, and your switch will only work one direction. That was really the only issue I had with this install. I didn't take these out when I was modifying the hole, and I bent some of them up, and some of the switches would only work one way when I tried to install them again. I had some that would only put the window down and not up, and then I had some that would only put the window up and not down. It took me a while to troubleshoot this. I was actually flipping the switches around on the board, and I found out if the switch would only put the window down, if I flipped it around on the board, it would put the switch up. So it took a little bit of troubleshooting, but I came to the conclusion that it was these little contact tabs that were getting bent. So be very careful with these. But that is the process that you'll have to do if you reinstall the switch, or go out and test the switch, and it only works one way. It's because you bent one of these up. And what you'll have to do is just come back, pull it out, and just bend it down a little bit so it's pretty much straight across. Alright, now that we have those contact plates out, and go ahead and start modifying the switch. It doesn't really matter which one you do or which side you do, because the switch works both ways, and it's not really oriented any specific way on the board. So what you're going to do is take your X-Acto knife or your razor blade and just cut this little lip out right here. You want to cut pretty much the whole thing out from end to end. And make it flush with the bottom. See, and there you can see, the camera will focus, the little lip cut out. This is not the only way to do this. This is just the method that I prefer to do. I've seen other people where they take it and they'll just glue the LED right here or attach it, somewhere here, and it seemed like a cheap method to do it for me. Just super gluing an LED in there, and it didn't really cut it for me. So this is the method that I developed and chose to do. Alright, now that we have that lip cut out, we need to enlarge the hole. And again, taking your razor blade or your X-Acto knife, or you could even use a little drill bit. Just make sure that you use a bit that's as close to the exact size of the LED that you can. And we're just going to round out that hole a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. See, this is where I use my file. I make the hole a little bit bigger with the X-Acto. And then I just twist this end of the file through the hole. Make sure to blow out all the little plastic shavings. These can interfere with the contact plates once you put the switch back together. Alright, and test fit your LED once you've made the hole. And it fits in there pretty well. It's actually a little loose. I made this one a little bit bigger than it needed to be. As long as it fits in there, it doesn't have to be snug or anything. You just don't want it to make it too big that the little lip here on the end of it doesn't catch, so it goes all the way through. That would be a little bit too big. Alright, another important step here is once you've cut it out, there will be some plastic shavings in there around the hole. What you're going to want to do is take your screwdriver or your X-Acto knife and clean up around that hole. Just kind of scrape it out a little bit, get any extra extra lips that you may have created, any other shavings that have fallen in around the switch, and then just clean up the hole. That's all you really have to do. But it's very important because again, they can get in the way of the contact switch, or the contact plates. I'm sorry, and then your switch won't work. Now make sure to clean it out really well. And blow all the excess shavings out. All that. Alright, now that you've made the hole bigger, cut that lip off, and your LED fits in, you can go ahead and reassemble the switch. Just drop the little contact plates in there, just like they were to start with. Make sure there's no little plastic shavings anywhere on them. And these are small, so they can be kind of a pain to get back in there, but just work with it. And then put the switch itself back in. It just snaps back into the guide holes. I want to test it out, make sure put it back together right. Alright, now that we have this back together, we can go ahead and install the LED. I just put the LED in the hole and then bend it down, and then once it's bent, I take it out and press it down a little bit more just to make sure it sits flush. So it'll sit like that, and see it sits pretty flush with the bottom of it, so once you press it back onto the board, it fits pretty well. You can choose to glue this LED in the hole, but again, it's not really necessary. Once you press the switch back onto the board, it holds it on there. It's by itself, and doesn't really go anywhere, so not really necessary. Alright, now This is where it gets tricky. Up to this point it was fairly easy. Um, Actually soldering the LED can be a little bit more difficult. First, you want to make sure that you are soldering the right wire to the right side of the switch. What I do, I pull them apart, and normally I would cut these to length, but I actually need these LEDs for something else, so I'm not going to cut the wires on it this time. But just wrap it around the side. We're going to be soldering to this side contact point on both sides. So wrap the wire around, and I'd normally cut it right about there, so you have a little loop. Not too big, just enough to wrap it around, and then you'd solder this wire right to there. On the board, you can see here, these 4 holes are the contact points that give the switch power. We're going to be using power from these 2 holes right here. This top one is the positive, and the bottom one is the negative. Works the same on this switch up here. This side is the positive, and this side is the negative. One good way to tell which is the positive and the negative, the contact plate on the negative side will be down and making contact, and the positive will be up and not making contact. So the other side is opposite. This contact plate is down, so that's the negative, and this one is up, so that's the positive. Again, this one is down, so that's the negative. This one is up, so that's the positive. Alright, once you've oriented yourself on which contact is negative and which contact is positive, go ahead and strip the wires. This is where you have a little bit of option. Some people use wire stripping tools. I personally just like to use a lighter. And just burn it for a second or two, and then kind of pinch it with your fingernails and pull it off. And that's all you really need to do. You got 2 stripped wires, clean. You don't run the risk of cutting the individual strands. It's just my preferred method. You can do what you feel is best. You're going to want to twist them up. And here's what I do. This is by no means the only method to do this, but this is just how I prefer to do it. I strip about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of the wire. I twist it and then fold it in half. This will give you a little bit more surface area to work with when you're soldering, and it just makes life a little bit easier. Okay, now that we got the wire stripped, we're going to go ahead and solder it onto the board. Remember, negative on this side, positive on this side. You're also going to need some solder and soldering iron. I forgot to mention that in the beginning of this video. I use rosin core lead-free solder. That's the only solder I use on all of my projects. Just makes things easier and life a whole lot less complicated. Tin the tip of your iron a little bit. I'm a little shaky today. And get a nice little ball of solder on that wire. Now it may take you a few attempts to get a decent solder. These are fairly difficult, in my opinion. Depends on your level of soldering. If you don't get it in the first attempt, don't lose patience. Just try again. It doesn't have to be anything, super neat, as long as it's held on there. One thing you want to make sure of when you're soldering is that none of the solder spills into this cavity right here. You don't want to solder this little contact plate to what it makes contact with. That wouldn't be good. Now that we have both wires soldered onto the board, you're ready to put the switch back on the board. Now your finished one will not quite look like this. Like I said, normally you want to trim the wire so you don't have all this excess here. You're just going to tuck the LED back down into the hole it goes. This can be somewhat difficult, or tricky, not really difficult, to keep the LED in the hole. But you just put it back into the holes, and then make sure you grab the board like this, one finger on each side, and pinch the switch back into place. Make sure you press it down, pretty firmly, so it makes complete contact and it's all the way down on the board. And that's pretty much it. You're going to want to repeat this process on all 7 switches. I would advise you to do one switch at a time and take the board back out to your car, plug it back in, and test the switch after you do it to make sure that the window goes up and down and that the light works. If the LED doesn't illuminate, you may have soldered the wires onto the wrong sides, so flip those around and try again. If your switch doesn't work, or it only works one way, like I said earlier, it's because of these little contact plates. If it only goes down and it won't go up, pull the switch out, flip it around, and see if it'll go down then. If it goes down then only one side of them is not making contact. And if you look at it closely, you probably won't be able to tell now, but when you look at yours, the negative side will always be in contact. It should always be in contact. When the switch is not pushed, the positive side should be slightly off of it. And then when you move the switch, that will push the positive contact down onto the plate. If that's not making contact, then the window won't go up or down depending on which one is not correct. So you're going to want to take the switch apart again and bend those down a little bit and try again. This is the dangerous part and what can lead you to frying your circuit board. If you bend them too much and they make constant positive contact, as soon as you turn the key on, it'll fry the board. This board that I fried was doing that exact process, and I bent both of them too much. So it was making two positive contacts in the same switch and essentially trying to put the window up and down at the same time. I'm just glad that it only fried the circuit board of the $30 switch instead of something more expensive. But that's pretty much it. Once you get them all done and tested out, make sure they all light up and all the window switches work, and go ahead and reassemble the switch. It's fairly simple. It's exactly the opposite of taking it apart. And one other thing, this is something that I did. You can elect to do this or to not do this. In the factory switch, the tops of these are actually clear. This is one I got off of eBay. It's from, I think it said a Chrysler 200, I believe. It works the way it's supposed to, but these are painted. The factory ones will be clear, and what I did was sanded the tops with some 200 to 400 grit sandpaper, and that'll just give them a cloudy appearance, and it will diffuse the light of the LEDs a little bit better. Like I said, you can choose to do this or not to do this. Personally, I just think it looks a little bit better if you do. And that's about it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a PM on the forum, or shoot me a message on Facebook. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and test out the switch that I just did. You can see I have them, the cables plugged back in already. I'm going to go ahead and turn the key on in the ignition. There you can see the two that I already did, and then the one we just did. You can see the LED comes on, so that's a good thing. And this is the driver's side rear window. Goes down, and it goes up. So now that we tested that, we know that one's good. We can unhook it and go back in and finish up the last one.